We talked about what our friend Blinov sent us money and said that some of them pass Kvichkova. We say that we got and be sure to give. Well, then the news.
Well, here I would like to answer the question yet. Because in Twitter wrote me this question: do you think your work mechanism? Well, in general I tweeted a reply. But still want to be a man cannot hear. I believe that my work is useful for the Russian people, and it is. Let future generations define. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe something very serious. I will hope that it will be good. Then, here's Ruslan Saralev wrote. I published about Twitter. Kadyrov Mosque opened in Israel, named after his father. The Chechen government has allocated for our money is 6 million, if you remember. And here he is with me do not agree, and he writes, the construction of the stadium in St. Petersburg Zenit has already spent US $3 billion. And also your money? No. Well, certainly not ours. The money earned Putin. In the machine he worked, printed the money.
Well, something he apparently threw Yakunin.
Not our money. Whose money? Whose cons in the woods? Whose money from Yakunin, Putin, Abramovich? They that fell from the air? Martians brought them money? This is our money. Money that robbed us. Taken away from our children. Our old. Robbed our cities, our villages, our factories. Somehow gave the Chechens there. I do not understand. Somehow Yakunin. Somehow Abramovich. Reutenberg somehow. Somehow Timchenko. You can enumerate all the way, and all are well aware. So, all the money that went to the Zenith, the mosque, all of this, our money, and another opinion generally cannot be. Anyone who thinks differently, he's an idiot. Who is the idiot? Is the one who thinks differently. That's it.
General meeting of the Russian Academy of Sciences should adopt a new constitution and elect a bureau.
Yes, but in fact it is a question for Kovalchuk, who thinks that he breaks through the Academy of Sciences. But if he was so smart, doctor of physical and mathematical sciences, well, of course I just laugh like mad.
Kovalchuk, Russia, is that the bank?
Yes. Why is he allowed, then? Well, that's his brother. He wants his brother was in fact. And where are the Medical Agricultural Academy? Why combine all? But if all this is done for Kovalchuk, as he believes, then why are doctors then Titan? Why then was allowed to lead the Academy of Sciences corresponding member and not a cancer mission? He has turned his head to physics and mathematics, and he would have a clear answer why is it done? Now they took the charter. Now they're your main gather. I'm sure this will be mainly Kagel's member of the Academy of Medical Sciences Glybachko Peter's best friend Vyacheslav Volodin. Petya so quiet that would become clear by whom. And if Kovalchuk, which then feeds the illusion, let him throw these illusions. Now the only thing that can prevent Pete become. This is what I opened it and officially talk about it. This is the only step. Because Vyacheslav likes to do everything in quiet. Now here again, highlight through a magnifying glass, and even a lamp. And like cockroaches and ran and hid. No, it's not us. We're just like that. Lunch.
We are here, we paint. Assembly of the United Nations adopted a resolution.
Question. What do ordinary people? Immediately I want to answer this question. First, do not be easy. That is the main question in the Russian sense of the word. Any ordinary person cannot be a simple man. He may just be a man. That's it. And not to deceive yourself. This is the most important. That is, that does not hurt us when pressed, do not even hurt when we put. It's a shame when we feel stupid. That's a shame when you expose a fool when you say that everything is fine the way it should be. That is scary.
United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution calling on Ukraine not to recognize the secession of Crimea. That is the United Nations Convention against us now, huh?
Here write that in the next 2 days will be war. No, do not start, because the resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations, as well as the League of Nations, if you remember, history repeats itself again. What we have seen, when Hitler was furious. Well, the League of Nations as it is expressed there, finger threatened. AA said, it is clear that by the General Assembly of the United Nations, not because politically it is true. They need to do so. It is not necessary that even those who spoke there, they need it. More and more clear that this is a very capital game. In this game, all involved, who and how many parties summit, it is difficult to understand. It is clear that there are certain royals involved. Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, who may be in the dark, using? I do not know. China, by far. Of course, Buchanan Kissinger. Of course, Obama and so on. Someone used to the dark, someone openly use. Someone he uses. Now, in general, understand what is happening. Participants do not matter. What's the difference who rolls a barrel? Main barrel roll on you. It did not matter. Do you want this sideways, and cannot see all these silhouettes so to speak?
Timoshenko has declared his intention to run for president of Ukraine.
Timoshenko now be in an advantageous embodiment. Still, she has the unique people who advise. I do not think that, judging by her conversations that are recorded, the mind that it has a lot do not seen at least. She did not show. And all of these options it when she's like a grandmother sitting in a chair, talking in Ukrainian, and then immediately on the phone says in Russian, done in a normal voice, without any of this nonsense. It's a little amusing. But on the other hand, it directly gets into a jet. Can you imagine? She did nothing to oust Yanukovych. Out of jail. I'll fly. I do not know what she was sick if it's cured for 2 weeks. Immediately put on your feet. I noticed there is another with Naftogaz taken away, and he also drove in the truck. Timoshenko syndrome. Everyone's in a truck, and drove to jail. I can say that it greatly helped Putin. Timoshenko no one would have no chance to become president if not disconnected Crimea. Now, the only politician in Ukraine, which can promise to return Crimea, is Timoshenko. And I think with bombs, with all this nonsense with which information is passed, it does not leak, it's pure provocation. That is thrown off this information, it's like voice, installation and so on. For what? For it to be expressed there, that I will do everything in order to regain the Crimea. That is when a politician comes on the screen, this one, and when he says it in a stolen overheard conversation. It is quite another. And so it is a big plus for all the others that have not yet spoke clearly. They then speak out. He is already the first. Here people have written. I would answer in the same vein. He writes, why Russia always people suffer? Why Russia is suffering? Flawed people? No. The fact is that in terms of geopolitical interests, that's how you remember Bloch wrote a poem, Scythians. Here we are, such Scythians. Between two hostile races, the Mongols and Europe. And then not going anywhere. That is, we between Asia, Europe stand, Asia and interests do not coincide with the interests of Europe, of course, and our interests, of course, do not coincide with those of any other. Because we, like the monkey, cannot be both beautiful and smart. Therefore, the main problem when viewed in historical terms.
Ukraine issued a Russian accused of involvement in a gang on the territory of Chechnya. Mohammed Numagov.
КамАЗ отходов, забег уродов, рекорд надоев и ушат помоев.
In general, what can I say about this citizen? Well, there where he took part in something. In time, perhaps, could not agree with Kadyrov's people, and become one of the chief of staff or someone else. Well, who became all the same people who left the gang, killing Russian people, and then took them hostage and traded them, and then were amnestied. Russian soldiers who allegedly there something deal, no amnesty, they strictly punished. And all those pardoned, and besides, someone enrolled in the regiment Kadyrov. Someone in the government. Virtually all.
Полки кадыровские, кого-то пристроили в правительство, не кого-то, а практически всех и так далее. То есть забавно.
Very funny that Ukraine has issued such a person. Absolutely the same as in Chechnya. But not had time to get amnesty and swear Putin.
Ну только он не успел вовремя, так сказать, получить цедулю эту об амнистии и, так сказать, присягнуть Путину.
Купит. Купит цедулю.
Да нет, я думаю, что он, наверное, там из какого-нибудь другого тейпа или что-то. Там какие-то свои внутренние дела, то есть он уже не прокатывает. Мне в данном случае...
I interested in this case the situation is more Ukrainians.
С украинцами. То есть почему они его выдали?
Why they gave him. That is, they are the good guys here, take and give? I do not believe it. Do you understand? Something is behind this. We have seen that our guys gave Yushchenko. Yushchenko was in power. The president. A judge in the city of Vitsa issued a man from Samaro. A guy said, $3,000. Maybe it's not straight man Putin and sent what is the messenger. He brought the money and said that we should send a man. He was detained, held court. The court decided that this villain. And what of his villainy? The fact that he held an unauthorized rally in Samara? Can you imagine? Gave him for it, and put it here. So we see, despite the fact that the authorities in Ukraine, either, whether it Yushchenkov, Timoshenko, anyone, she declares freedom in minor clerks for money doing anything. If this judge Vitsa subjected to lustration, I would be very happy, but I am afraid of what can happen on the contrary. Like the snake that bites itself in the tail.
Crimean authorities published a list of persona non grata.
It is generally very funny. Why? Because for non-lawyers, I explain, though, in general, is not a lawyer and clear. Non grata, that is undesirable person may be recognized only on a national scale. That is the state with the sovereignty, by far. And it says that these people persona non grata. Well, basically it applies to persons enjoying diplomatic immunity. Well, for example, which is the second secretary of the embassy was caught spying on, but cannot arrest him and twist his arms. But it is possible to declare persona non grata. So he must for a certain time to collect their belongings and leave no longer come until he was forgiven and or do not agree. So Crimea. Very funny. In this case, it is the names of all 300 of the Ukrainian figures, Klitschko Tenebok. Well, the list of all recorded and announced in Crimea persona non grata, and it has no power, in terms of the law. Because any of these people entered the territory of the Russian Federation, through any checkpoint, then arrives in the territory of the Russian Federation in the Crimea. And no one can evict. Expulsion, a state measure, not in any way a measure of federal subject. So it is very funny.
Deputies of the City Council in Western Ukraine Rivne made a joint statement on the death of the right sector coordinator, Alexander Muzichko. He, Sashka Bailey, calling it a victim of political assassination custom. Do you agree with this formulation?
Absolutely. He was killed for political reasons. He can be the most unpleasant feelings nourish. It causes hostility fact, but facts of political order is obvious. And here again there is the image of Vitsia judge. There is a question, and maybe some guys here have paid for it? That is, many of the issues being addressed is very simple. As in the Ukraine in general, all easily solved. Took the journalist was killed by the president of the team. After the president did not prosecute. What was his name? Do not you remember? President of Ukraine, who was Yushchenko?
Kravchuk?
No.
Okay, it does not matter. History has forgotten his name.
Kuchma. Exactly. He was not prosecuted, you know why? Because of his conversation where he gave the command to destroy the journalist recorded in digital format. And so, despite the fact that it was the first instance, the question was asked, whether it was possible to make changes to the record? The answer was, you can. Everything. So it's not guilty.
About Sasha Bilogo now very large tree queries and issues on the internet. And in particular yesterday we already talked about this. Nothing has changed? Right sector will react to it.
Well,
do not you
if
think?
They are not idiots, certainly will.
Legitimate, or the same means. It's important.
Whatever this was not Muzichko, took him and killed. Do you understand? That is because you cannot do even the most terrible criminals. Do you understand? That is, any criminal should be brought to justice. When you can kill someone. Only during the fighting. And then, there are certain conventions that prohibit the killing of prisoners of war. Do you understand? And here. Well, how strange it all. This is frustrating.
Putin approved the creation of a national payment system. Perfect.
Yes. Currently I am most interested. I thought when I read about the payment system, I thought, well, there will be a lot of money to deal with this charge of payment system. Doctor of Physical and Mathematical Sciences, Kovalchuk, Rotenberg brothers, I do not know, Kanabrimovich, which will tamp there, although not yet started, that's amazing. Well, if you will, it will arrive here, begins to engage in the payment system. And I am wondering what will be the share of Putin? What percentage of it is currently postponed? Do you understand? As I recall, One politician in the 2000s, in a very serious grade, he brought the paper, brought my companion, and he sits, looking at this paper, and said, "I do not see." Then this anecdote did. Asked, "And what you do not see?" He says, "Do not see myself. Here and here."
Поручик Киже.
Да, поручик Киже.
Russia conducts large-scale exercises on the border with Ukraine.
Well, you know, these large-scale exercises, about which we have already said yesterday that there is what that hospitals deploy, which is a column of tanks regularly travel. People called us and said that the tanks one way and then go back. That is, it's all show. Leave traces rendered product. No more. I think, well, I can be mistaken. But you know, most likely a feature of Putin. Remember how Angela Merkel told well and told the media. Rather, it is not even, and her assistants. As Putin stated that, at a meeting with Angela Merkel should not be any animal, because she is afraid of dogs awful. And as they sat, were talking, the door opened, the dog came Putin, Coney, and walked over to Merkel and she was shocked. Even where there was a photo where they sit, and it fits the dog. This show of force is a method of intimidation. And clinical bullying. That is, when you say you should not do, it does not help. Well, anyway it does, with a view to shake. Well, the bad boy, in general.
Latvia has introduced criminal punishment for denial of Soviet and German occupation.
Latvia or Lithuania?
It says, Latvia.
Well, these topics end in Lithuania and Latvia. And in Estonia too. They are very burning. That is, they constantly it is heated. In Latvia, especially warmed up, because there is a huge amount of Russian people, a large number of Russian-speaking people. Impact on the culture and most importantly a very strong policy. Therefore, they should try to do so, as it is profitable. That is, if the Estonians went to a simpler way, as we know, that is, they were not given a passport. Latvians are less able to do this. Not so frankly as Estonians. Because Latvians more than Estonians, so they act more gently. But in fact, all these negatives, Holocaust denial, denial of the Armenian genocide, it's such nonsense. Well, there is in every state, freedom of speech. If the person wants to deny something, well, anyone who wants to deny that the earth is round, let goes and denies. It's his job. Someone denies the Holocaust, let denies. What are the problems? Especially in a dispute born truth. When it comes to what that person and says he rather it asked for the money to smuggle the study, and as an engineer, he has determined that this room could not be destroyed tens of thousands of people. 4 square meters room, and there could not cut anyone. Immediately 4, as it is written in the testimony, and so on. And he gave an appropriate conclusion. And for this denial was sentenced to 18 months. It's really fun. When the engineer, who is a specialist, used his expertise. Well, it is not that funny. Do you understand? And in Latvia will be too. That is, they will now such a law, and then they start to humiliate anyone who would speak, especially the elderly, which they try to put him in prison. We were liberators. And they will tell you that they occupiers and not liberators.
Хотя, вот, когда это самое, латыши, вот, как говорится, чья бы корова мычала, а их молчало, это точно, потому что, ну, кто из народов сделал больше
more good for the Bolsheviks than Latvians? Well, maybe only the Jews? Latsisi, Peters, all those guys, Shelves Latvian riflemen who guarded Lenin. Bayonets, which conducted the Bolshevik movement. Today I wrote a man of Bolshevik terror, and said that it is necessary to repent in this. And who will repent in this? And what's the point? And anyway why? We need each other to repent. To whom? Before Latvians repent. To whom? The Jews to repent. Before whom we must repent it? I generally do not intend to have nothing to repent.
You're not a Jew, I understand, did not kill.
Wow. But I'm not talking about it now. Well, my relatives participated in all the activities. And the one and on the other hand, they were all. And to whom I repent? I now do not understand. Formulation of the question. That is it, the historical reality. In history, it is. Repent, repent not, it does not exclude nowhere. If there is, the Roman Catholic Church began to repent of the Inquisition. Well, that's her business. Let them do what they want. I believe that the Russian people do not make excuses to anyone do not need. And most important, the biggest mistake the fact that we were forced to do, is that Russia was the successor to the Soviet Union. No. Russia was supposed to be the legal successor, the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. And no more. Tajikistan, Tajik Republic, Lithuania, Lithuanian Republic. And for what was going on there, let them be responsible for it, not us. Why should we be responsible?
USA interrupted cooperation with Russia in the fight against drugs.
Well, what can one say? Now Putin's people will not be cheap cocaine. All cocaine for them to be expensive.
European prices.
Yes. I love the issue of cooperation in the fight against drugs. That is, when we consume a quarter of the world's heroin, this collaboration. And if they stop, Russia will be 100% of the world heroin consume. How can you be? Although, we know. I served at that time when Afghanistan was on the border. Know very well that attempts Central Intelligence, use the traffic of drugs for the collapse of the Soviet Union, were then very serious. Imported drugs in the coffins of soldiers instead. Heroin is imported. But it was not what it was nonsense. Because the Soviet Union built a fairly rigid system, and because the Soviet Union was not the main basis for addiction. Do you understand?
They immediately identified such things.
It's not even identify. It's about the internal state of a man. Do you understand? There was no such
The man
public
was in a
attitude.
group.
Yes. What can I say? Of course. If it is from the USA, special services will be made to strengthen Russian anesthesia. You import here even more drugs.
Нарколизации, да, России, то есть по ввозу сюда еще большего количества наркотиков тяжелых.
Hard. Besides heroin, although they may come up with something and make it cheaper. But also other drugs, of course, that the world is now a huge amount. And they can easily put this here bandwagon.
Clearly. Chief editor, Modern Crimea, was arrested for an article about the Crimea. Newspaper circulation, withdrawn.
Yes, he was dragged out of the house, put in a camera. I do not know what to do with him, but he now writes letters, fine handwriting. The investigative committee requests to open a case. It's very funny. His article was that some Ukrainian scientific figure published a letter in the newspaper. That's it. Published an opinion. For this edition confiscated, and he was kept in a cell almost the whole day.
Here we have another related news. Putin spoke out against repression.
That's just the question. Putin has always been against repression. He always knows when to say. Do you understand? Putin against repression. This is a poster for vegetarian cannibals. Otherwise, do not say. I would even read what he said. He even reminded of the Orange Revolution. Colored Revolution.
Putin said the need to analyze the events in Ukraine, all color revolutions last time.
That is, other times it looks like they just stole it. Picture this. Across the border were colored revolutions. Everything is already over. In the early 2000s they began, and he says, it is necessary to transport analysis. And what people are doing this. I understand that the special services had to do it once. They ran the presidential administration, selling gas, oil was sold. Area of control. Were authorized representatives of the president. Even became citizens of Finland. For this, too, needed time to pay. That is, for the analysis of all of these things at the time they were not. Right now the war, and had the time, can be analyzed. Here, he said. About freedom of speech and of the constitutional freedoms, well said. We cannot indulge in any euphoria, create conditions that are unacceptable to civil society to protect their rights. Citizens should always realize that they have a set of tools and methods, lawful means and methods by which they can use to make a claim power if other way it can be done. Including demonstrations, processions. This is interesting. What methods that citizens have. Putin, he always talks about some methods of citizens. Let him, at least one method call. Write letters? Putin write letters? This method of protecting the citizens?
Andrei Makarevich wants to take the title for all the anti-Putin position, and they rank Putin what? He sang the song? Putin?
Well, at least cleansed Andrew. In this respect I fully agree with United Russia. Andrei Makarevich
should throw in the face of all these titles.
No, not in person, but just in the toilet after all these titles and say that they belong there. At the very smelly, which is Putin all ranks, a place there. And in general,
I still
believe
need
that.
to recognize Andrei Makarevich, bad musician. Let it be appropriated by this title. And no one to listen to him after this course will not be.
I think it is necessary for many people, so that represent art, and that at the hearing, which represent the elite of Russian culture. They need to spend a gesture that did Beatles in his time. That is to throw all the presents. And say, now.
At the same time, Putin's approval rating rose to 82%. And Obama's rating falls. Somewhere, 59% now.
82% or more, Putin, as they say. It is much like a fairy tale about a gold antelope. When more gold, more. How much do you want gold? And if it is too much, stupid animal, gold cannot be too much. And then, enough, enough. I am afraid that Putin once drowned your rating, when he tipped the scales at 100. It's very funny. These 82%. That is, we want to say that if I were to go out on the street, people will begin to stop. And I will ask, who do we have in Russia is the coolest? And 82 people out of 100. I must say, Putin. Is this a joke? Well, if say 20. Well, maybe 25. But if I go out and ask, who's in charge homosexual? I assure you, I know that 82% say. I know that name. Because I did not once.
Maybe spend your poll?
Yes, you can go out with you tomorrow specifically to stand on any street and interview 100 people. Error will be small. Maximum error, it is 10%. This is the maximum. That is, when 200 people in a city such as Saratov, the error will be less than 3%. Well, at 100, if the reserve, 10. Do you understand? We assume 10 will immediately write him a plus. And look. But, be sure to ask, who is the main homosexual? To weigh.
Boris Nemtsov said, Putin finally give Russia to China.
It was obvious. Do you understand? Boris, in this case, played a captain obvious. I have great respect Nemtsov, because he's a smart man. I know him personally. And when you personally communicate with the person, you look at him and vocabulary, phraseological units, depth of knowledge. Immediately clear that this is not stupid, and intelligent man who sees far. He has a very good outlook. But that's about China. It's so obvious that the same thing as to say that tomorrow the sun go down in the east. It is clear that the rise. If he expressed a deep thought, I would have admired. What he said is the last. This has already said it all. There is probably no normal Russian nationalist who would not have said this back in 2003. Yesterday, when I read Nemtsov Facebook found a newspaper with my pics. And so the phrase. Putin has only two options. Either he rely on the Russian people, or to the Chinese. Everything. It is written in 2003. And further, all events are confirmed. All these of the concession agreement, the construction of bridges, roads, railways, airfields. I mean China on Russian territory. This is what? Russia received as far east. Railroad did there. Tsar Alexander III did the railroad and all. The Chinese there was nothing there, and we had a railroad. Would go on. But there were other geopolitical interests, and had some problems. So when we talk about what steps Putin is a gift to China, it is obvious. Not obviously just stupid.
Examination ruled that Boris Berezovsky hanged himself in his scarf.
As well as Isadora Duncan? Well, I think. There and his daughter said she was not all right. Both the guard, who was not at the time of death Berezovsky, suddenly gives such wonderful testimony that he wanted to hang himself, and the like. Very strange. Guard was not at that moment, and he knows everything. The fact that he had planned, it leads to some thoughts. If I were an investigator on the case, the first person I interviewed is very tough, it's a security guard. Absolutely. Which had disappeared, and at the same time says that Boris Berezovsky wanted to hang myself. Makes you think.
In Turkey, following the Twitter, blocked and YouTube.
Right here. Nemtsov stoked Station Mir with Putin. At first, I do not praise Nemtsov. Secondly, I do not remember that he drowned Station Mir, because, under Putin, Nemtsov has catapulted everywhere, but that's what made negative. Nemtsov does not compare with what Putin has done. This incomparable value. So, this does not mean that as I said, some of whom are normal words that, real, all believe that this man somewhere come on, as president. No. I am president of Russia. Boris did not exactly come on. Do you understand? I believe that the Liberal Party should have its rightful place in the thought. The Russian Duma. Well, I'm talking about the parliament. But no more. I do not think that Russia should be a liberal government, and the more liberal commander. What was the theme?
YouTube blocked in Turkey.
It's really fun. Have fun there. That is, the court allowed the unlocked Twitter. They are now blocked YouTube. Same situation. There, as I understand it, people calmly watching, but formally told Turkish providers cannot be locked. They said, yes, of course. Moreover, it is done all regulations. It has a feature of those who are now in power. Which we here in Russia dismantle and positioned as great guys. Putin cooperates with Erdogan. And very good cooperation. I do not know, they divide the money or not, but probably. And what we get in return? We get on its borders hotbed of Islamism. Because power in Turkey is Islamist now. We get those people who are now heated war in Syria. Where are killing our brothers Orthodox. And is ruthlessly kill. And Putin was not our Orthodox brothers, protects note and Assad. Well, what can I wish Erdogan? Twitter, if it cannot sanctify well, that YouTube would at least show it in all its glory as he drags the money there. It's $1 billion. I cannot calm down about this information, how they got there. His son downloaded $1 billion. It's very funny.
We've got a little time to ask questions.
Vyacheslav, how much time in the minds of Russians will sit patriotic Kremlin mood uplifting power ratings when the veil will fall and people will realize that nothing has changed? Very fast. Hooray patriotism, he briefly. That anyone can say. Here's how. Hooray patriotism ended the First World War. When the war started. Yeah, I'll want to fight. And in Austria-Hungary, if you look. Good soldier Schweig. There were also options. Savage, which recognized an idiot, really wanted to go and die for the emperor. And here, the same situation. When the peasants ended patriotism, when food allotment started, when we arrived, they said, "The brothers, you have to sell grain at a fixed price." They said, "Well, let's. Why is not it due for our king?" When they started trading with him, to pay for which they should be used to get some money, and at a fixed price. Well, I guess there was dissatisfaction with the first. And so on. And then this mechanism is curled. And now, that is, any opposition in the world, it affects the state of the countries inside. And of course the state. And now people will see that the nuts wrap that problem more and so on. And what they get in return. And in return they get on the first channel, Kislev, which, he says, as everything is fine, what villains Americans, how wonderful they're, Chinese friends, and we settle in the future Russia. Very quickly people come to the norm. Question. As president, you would have shot his uncle, if required by law? No. I have not shot my uncle. My uncle, Nikolai Rozkov, a very fine man. And if the law would require uncle shoot, I'd shot the law. Do you understand? Because you need to understand that if I have an uncle was such that it was possible to be shot, I'd be a jerk. My uncle, a holy man. And my uncle, whom I remember, people were super decent. Father's brother died for their country. In Lithuania, the way dead was a prosecutor, he was killed. Another uncle was a lawyer, died very young man, much younger than I am now. One uncle, the only one that is alive now, a very decent man, worked all my life, worked hands, smartest man. That there are many thoughts that I express to you here, I've heard of it. And he even post-secondary education, no. Well, so bright mind, so he understands it. Therefore, if such a law that should be shot uncle, it means that it is a bad law. Vyacheslav, what can you say? In fact, transfer America entire stock of enriched uranium at about 1,000 times cheaper than the real value. Well, uranium transactions that were carried out during the Yeltsin and Putin in the days. This topic is closed. Everything related to uranium, and all that concerns radioactive waste. This is, I probably will not say anything because it will say, the tribunal. That seeps through the media, is often misinformation. We faced it. Very often we are faced with this. Therefore, it must figure out some competent service. Question. Do you think whether the Russian economy to sustain a war against the West? That situation appears. You are free to answer this question. Here, if the West will fight against Russia, he will have to buy Russian oil and gas? No, it will probably. It's logical. But imagine. Well, not war. Here today, suddenly West says, we buy more oil and gas in general, will not you? Would need a war to Russia withstood something? Without war, everything. At the end of this,
hunger.
Just at this moment, almost everything. That is, from now on, China will invest money in Russia and begins stagnation. Out begins this fall into the abyss. And, quite shallow. If someone thinks that long to fall, he is mistaken. As China begins for your money to make a complaint. That's it. That is to stop all this. Putin drove Russia in such a framework.
Такие рамки, что она очень сильно, вот его РФ, зависит.
It is highly dependent on Western partners, and all from the international partnership. And in this situation, understand, that's when they say, Putin behaves correctly, Putin normal, he's not crazy. Here, the person driving the country, their state, drives it into something that it cannot. This country cannot, without the partnership. And then he spoils all relationships. Is this normal in a human psyche? If you want to send all in the ass, then you before 15 years do not steal, and does not take crap, and 15 years to create the power of this state, including the cost. First of all, the economic. As anyone who wrote about the war, Clausewitz, Sun Tzu, but anyone, Smirnov, what is important in the military strategy? Money. This economic resources. How can you fight if you have nothing to feed soldiers? If you have nothing to wear, shoe? Remember Shtmenko, scrapbook officer of the General Staff. Open up, you can search in Google, notes officer of the General Staff, Shtmenko. On some pages of the penultimate, not remember exactly, can the 5th page of the end. He writes how after the parade on Red Square, talked with Stalin. And Stalin asked, respected, and why Hitler lost the war on us. Well, Shtmenko began counting on his fingers. That's it. And he said, all this nonsense. Hitler lost because a large number of soldiers he had. He withdrew from the people in the army, a huge number of human resources. And no one was easy to work with. Economically, it could not provide the war, so he lost. It is here, the view of Stalin, who voiced Shtmenko. Therefore, Russia is not about what war cannot even talk. That's just ridiculous. This is ridiculous. Vyacheslav, your guess. Where did the gold reserves of the USSR? Well, my guess is that the gold reserves of the USSR is very active, as we know, was used by Gorbachev. And of course not completely gone. Absolutely. Because when Yeltsin came to power, there was something else. And it was good. But what, they battered him? Yes. It is quite obvious. So, I think that some party money, which tell about, well, most likely they were not. And if they were, then it must be in Putin's KGB friends asked, where did they go, and how it all was. Vyacheslav, you have not answered before. How do you see the future judicial system? Justice will look like? Justice, by the way, very hard to change. It makes no sense. Importantly, people change, that of justice. Main change is that the judge is totally addicted. Dependence of judges. It should be only the law, but a judge need for very carefully oversee. Very carefully. That he was constantly independent. That no one could intervene and, most importantly, that there is no corruption. There are so many methods. About the judicial system, I think it is necessary to speak separately somehow. We've talked about this, that the current judicial system must, of course, be completely destroyed. And the newborn, where Themis with eyes closed, not open, like a statue at the Supreme Court stands, with open eyes, with scales and sword. Election of judges is generally the main condition. The election of judges and district attorneys election. About this we have said many times, so I think that you remember. 100% elective course. No purpose. There is some president, something, somewhere. Choose a judge. If he is wrong, then quickly throw him out and plant. And the jury. In most criminal cases, of course, must be the jury. Well, small things that magistrates consider, no. And the jury must be real, not those recorded in these RIAB acting that electronically, and most residents voting. Payment must be adequate, and so on. It definitely. Okay. Goodbye. Something I got excited.
Goodbye.